It's over for Chuck Schumer. Trump obliterates Schumer's FAA lies live on TV. The air inside the White House press briefing room was electric. Rows of reporters sat stiffly, their hands gripping pens and recorders, eyes locked on the empty podium. The hum of whispered conversations and the rapid clicking of cameras filled the space. Everyone in the room knew something big was about to happen. This wasn't the usual policy update or a routine diplomatic briefing. This was something far more explosive. Donald J. Trump was about to walk onto that stage. And whenever Trump stepped up to a microphone, fireworks were guaranteed. At the center of the storm was Chuck Schumer, the Senate Majority Leader and one of Trump's longtime political rivals. Schumer had been making the rounds on every major media outlet, blaming Trump's administration for aviation safety concerns. He accused Trump of recklessly slashing FAA funding, and the headlines were merciless. Schumer slams Trump for jeopardizing airline safety. Trump's FAA layoffs creating dangerous skies. Democrats sound the alarm. Is Trump making flying unsafe? The narrative was clear. Schumer and his allies had painted Trump as the villain, recklessly endangering airline passengers. But now it was Trump's turn to respond. The room fell silent as the double doors at the back swung open. Trump strode in with his signature confidence, his bright red tie swinging slightly as he approached the podium. Behind him, a massive screen had already been set up, displaying charts, data, and headlines. Most strikingly, it featured a freeze frame of Chuck Schumer mid-sentence during one of his many press appearances. Trump adjusted the microphone, scanned the room, and smirked. Well, he began, spreading his hands. Here we go again. A few nervous chuckles rippled through the crowd. Trump's tone was light, almost playful, but everyone who knew him understood this was the calm before the storm. He leaned forward, gripping the sides of the podium. So, today we're talking about airplanes. We're talking about Chuck Schumer. And, of course, we're talking about fake news. The first shot had been fired. Caitlin Collins from CNN wasted no time. She leaned forward, raising her microphone, ready to pounce. Mr. President, with multiple aviation incidents happening recently, do you take responsibility? Has your administration's budget cuts to the FAA weakened airline safety? Her words hung in the air like a loaded gun. Trump's smirk widened. He loved it when they made it this easy for him. Wow, he replied, letting the single word linger as the room held its collective breath. Caitlin, that's a very dishonest question, but I expect that from CNN. Some reporters rolled their eyes while others scribbled furiously in their notebooks. Trump continued, gesturing toward the screen behind him. You see this? This is Chuck Schumer doing what Chuck Schumer does best, lying. He's out there acting like I personally went into the FAA and started firing people left and right. It's ridiculous. It's nonsense. But of course you guys love it. He tapped the podium for emphasis. So let's break it down, shall we? The screen flickered, switching to a timeline of FAA staffing changes. Trump pointed at it. We have 45,000 employees at the FAA. We made minor adjustments, less than 400 people. All probationary. All non-essential. None of them were air traffic controllers. None of them were critical safety inspectors. So, tell me, Caitlin, how exactly does that crash an airplane? Caitlin opened her mouth to respond, but Trump wasn't done. He turned back to the audience. You see, this is what they do. They take a completely normal policy adjustment, slap on a scary headline, and suddenly it's the apocalypse. The crowd murmured in response, and some reporters exchanged nervous glances. Trump was in full control of the room. Jim Acosta from MSNBC jumped in next. But Mr. President, Senator Schumer specifically pointed to your FAA cuts as dangerous. Doesn't that concern you? Trump chuckled. Jim, let me tell you something about Chuck Schumer. He's been in Washington for 40 years. 40 years. And in all that time, do you know how many things he's actually fixed? 0. The audience reacted, with some reporters smirking while others furiously typed on their laptops. Trump waved a hand dismissively. Chuck Schumer talks. That's all he does. He goes on TV, he points fingers, and then he goes back to his fancy office and does nothing. And now he's blaming me for aviation problems? Give me a break. The screen changed again, this time showing an old clip of Schumer discussing aviation safety during the Biden administration. Trump gestured at it. Where was Chuck Schumer when Pete Buttigieg was ignoring air traffic controller shortages? Where was he when Biden let the FAA run on outdated systems? Nowhere. Silent. But the second I start fixing things, suddenly, it's a crisis. It's a crisis. Interesting, isn't it? Trump's voice cut through the murmurs in the room as a few reporters whispered among themselves. The narrative was shifting and everyone in the room could feel it. April Ryan from ABC was next to take a shot. So, you're denying there's an increase in aviation accidents under your administration? Trump sighed dramatically, leaning into the microphone. April. You've been in this room a long time. You should know better. The screen behind him flickered again, now displaying FAA's safety statistics from the previous year alongside this year's numbers. Trump gestured at the data. Look at this. January and February, fewer incidents than the same period last year. But you don't hear that on the news, do you? No, because that doesn't fit the narrative. He leaned in closer to the podium, his tone sharp and pointed. Let me make this really simple. There is no crisis. The only thing crashing and burning is the credibility of the fake news media. The audience erupted. Some reporters were visibly frustrated, while others typed frantically into their laptops. Trump folded his arms, letting the room settle. Now, I could stand here all day debunking these lies, but honestly, it's exhausting. So let me just ask one simple question. If Schumer really cared about airline safety, why didn't he do something about it before? Silence filled the room. Trump waited, his gaze moving across the crowd. Nothing. He nodded. Exactly. Because this isn't about safety. It's about politics. It's about headlines. It's about Democrats being desperate because they know they're losing. Then, with a trademark smirk, he added, "But hey, keep going. Keep pushing your fake stories. Because guess what? The American people aren't buying it anymore." The press room erupted into chaos. Reporters shouted questions, camera lights flashed, and Trump stepped back from the podium, letting the storm unfold around him. He had won this round and he knew it. The White House press room was buzzing. Trump had torn apart the media's narrative with his signature blend of facts, bravado, and sarcasm. Reporters were still reeling, but they weren't ready to back down yet. And neither was Chuck Schumer. Somewhere on Capitol Hill, Schumer was watching. He had spent decades mastering the art of political counterattacks, and there was no way he would let Trump walk away with an easy win. Within minutes, his team had leaked a response to the press. A statement blazed across the phone screens of eager journalists. Trump is lying about FAA safety. The truth is simple. He gutted aviation funding, and now Americans are at risk. If he won't take responsibility, then we will. The press room erupted again. Reporters shouted more questions at Trump like bullets in a firefight. Jim Acosta, always eager to take the lead, shot up from his seat. "Mr. President, Schumer just released a statement calling your claims false. He says your administration did cut FAA funding and that it's impacting safety. How do you respond?" Trump sighed loudly, shaking his head. "Jim, you're like a broken record. I already answered this." He turned back to the massive screen, where a new slide popped up. FAA budget, no significant cuts to safety operations. Air traffic controllers, no layoffs. Schumer's claims, 100% political theater. Trump pointed at the screen. "Look at this, folks. Do you see anywhere on this list where we gutted FAA safety funding? Because it didn't happen." He turned back to the press, his tone dripping with sarcasm. "Schumer knows it. The media knows it. But hey, lying gets more clicks, right?" A few reporters muttered, shifting uncomfortably in their seats. April Ryan tried again. "But, Mr. President, isn't it fair to say that even if you didn't directly cut safety funding, changes in your budget have affected FAA operations?" Trump tilted his head, pretending to consider her question. "You know, that's an interesting point, April. So let's talk about Schumer's record on aviation." The screen flickered again, this time revealing a clip from 2019. Schumer stood at a podium, passionately talking about the need for FAA reform. Here's the rewritten script, word for word as requested. The FAA has outdated systems, an air traffic controller shortage, and needs immediate modernization. Trump grinned. You hear that? Chuck Schumer himself admitting there were problems before I even took office. The press stayed silent. Trump pushed forward. So here's the real question. If Schumer cared so much about aviation safety, why didn't he fix it when his guy was in the White House? Why didn't he demand Buttigieg do something? Why is this suddenly a crisis now that I'm back? Silence. Trump leaned in, voice lowering for emphasis. Because it was never about safety. It was always about politics. The audience murmured. Some reporters flipped through their notes, realizing Trump had just flipped the entire conversation back onto Schumer. Caitlin Collins wasn't giving up. But Mr. President, even if Schumer failed in the past, does that excuse your administration's handling of aviation now? Trump chuckled. Caitlin, you're really stretching here. He tapped the podium. My administration is already fixing the problem. More FAA hires, new safety initiatives, upgraded systems. We're actually doing what Schumer just talks about. He gestured broadly. That's the difference. He talks. I act. He complains. I solve it. The audience reacted. Some reporters looked visibly frustrated. Trump had, once again, taken control. Trump looked around, then sighed dramatically. Look, we can do this all day. The media will keep pushing Schumer's talking points, and I'll keep proving them wrong. He folded his arms. But here's the bottom line. The only thing crashing in this country is the credibility of the fake news and the Democrats. The press room erupted again, shouting, camera flashes, and frantic typing. Trump stepped back from the podium, smirking. He had just won another round and he knew it. The White House press briefing descended into chaos. Reporters shouted over one another, cameras flashed wildly, and frantic keystrokes filled the air as journalists rushed to get their headlines out. Trump had just obliterated Schumer's narrative in real time, exposing the hypocrisy, the lies, and the media's desperate attempts to cover for him. But Schumer wasn't done. While Trump stood at the podium smirking, a new development hit the press room like a grenade. A CNN reporter's phone buzzed violently, then others and others. Chuck Schumer had just gone live on national television, holding a surprise press conference outside the Capitol. His voice boomed over the speakers as networks cut away from the White House briefing. The American people deserve better than Donald Trump's reckless mismanagement of aviation safety. We will not allow him to endanger lives with his disastrous FAA cuts. That's why I am calling for an immediate congressional investigation into Trump's budget decisions regarding airline safety. The press room erupted again. Trump blinked, then let out a low, amused chuckle. Wow, that was fast. He turned back to the reporters. You see what's happening here, folks? I'm still standing at the podium, and Chuck is already running to the cameras to save face. He got caught lying, and instead of admitting it, he's doubling down. Typical. Jim Acosta, emboldened by Schumer's sudden offensive, jumped in. Mr. President, Schumer just announced a congressional investigation into your FAA budget. Do you take this seriously? Trump raised an eyebrow. Jim, I take a lot of things seriously. Chuck Schumer? Not one of them. The audience laughed, but Acosta pushed forward. But Mr. President, isn't this a sign that Democrats are concerned about aviation safety? Trump leaned forward, voice dropping into a mock whisper. Jim, let me tell you a little secret. Democrats aren't concerned about anything except one thing, power. He straightened up. This isn't about safety. It's about politics. It's about Schumer trying to create a scandal out of thin air because they know the election is coming and they have nothing else to run on. April Ryan interjected. But an investigation into FAA cuts, shouldn't the American people be concerned? Trump snorted. Concerned about what? Fewer incidents, better hiring, improved safety measures? Because that's what's actually happening. He gestured toward the massive screen, where a new chart appeared showing aviation safety statistics from the last 5 years. The room stilled. Trump pointed at the graph. Look at these numbers. Aviation incidents are lower now than they were under Biden. But you don't hear that on CNN, do you? A few reporters muttered quietly, eyes darting between their notes and the data on the screen. Trump smirked. Schumer is out there screaming about dangerous skies, but the numbers say the skies are safer now than before. So either Schumer can't read, or he's lying. Maybe both. Laughter rippled through the room, but some reporters were visibly uneasy because they knew Trump was right. Caitlin Collins tried again. Mr. President, you keep deflecting to Schumer's past, but the fact remains your budget did adjust FAA staffing. Trump sighed theatrically. All right, Caitlin. Let's do this. Let's talk about Schumer's past, since you brought it up. The screen flickered again, this time showing a video clip from 2016. Schumer was standing in front of a crowd talking about the dire need to modernize the FAA. We must take immediate action to upgrade our air traffic control systems and ensure that FAA staffing remains strong. Trump paused the clip. He turned to the audience. That was 7 years ago. Do you know what he did after this speech? Silence. Trump answered for them. Nothing. Absolutely nothing. He pointed at the press. The same guy who is now pretending to be the aviation safety.